The night should have been perfect. Balloons swaying gently, candles waiting to be lit, a table I had set with more care than most weddings. I stood behind it all, the father who'd thought of every detail. Her favorite chocolate cake, the white roses she once loved as a child, even the playlist looping softly in the background. Then, as the room erupted in laughter, my daughter leaned close, her voice slicing through the music. "The only gift I want this year is for you to disappear. Forever." I didn't answer, I didn't argue. I just smiled, lifted my glass, and let the moment pass. Because breaking her joy in front of others would have been one cruelty too many. But that wasn't the end. 2 months later, red and blue lights flashed across that same house. Police stormed through the front door, bracelets of steel closing on the wrists of the daughter who once clung to me as a child. And me? I wasn't there anymore. You won't believe what led from that birthday table to the sound of handcuffs. But before I take you through it, subscribe so you don't miss the next gripping stories like this one. I woke before dawn on Emily's birthday. The house was still, every small sound magnified. The kettle's hiss like steam in a cavern, the click of a switch echoing louder than footsteps. I moved slowly, carefully, as though the walls themselves were listening. On the dining table lay the cloth I'd ironed twice the night before, smoothed now with the flat of my palms until not a wrinkle remained. It carried the faint lavender scent of starch, the kind my own mother once used for special guests. Balloons bobbed lazily near the ceiling, tied in sets of 3, ribbons trimmed evenly. Burgundy and gold, the colors Emily once adored as a teenager when her notebooks were filled with glitter pens and magazine cutouts. On the counter sat the cake, ordered weeks in advance. Thick chocolate frosting swirled high, crowned with sugar roses in perfect white. I bent close, adjusting its position so the roses faced the chair where she would sit. The sweetness hung in the air, mingling with the sharper note of coffee brewing. I checked the playlist. Soft jazz, warm but unobtrusive. I adjusted the volume once, twice, then once more, until it felt just right. Enough to fill the spaces, not enough to drown voices. Every fork lay exactly parallel, napkins folded in neat triangles. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of wanting. Wanting this night to be right. Hoping that maybe, just maybe, it could stitch together what had torn between us. As I leaned over the cake, the sweetness in the air pulled me backward, to another birthday, when Emily was only 6. Money was thin then. Store cakes were luxuries. I had stayed up half the night, sugar dust clinging to my shirt, trying and failing 3 times before a lopsided cake finally rose in the oven. Its surface cracked, uneven, but when I crowned it with backyard strawberries, it became a treasure. I carried it to her with trembling hands, candles bent, wax dripping. She gasped, pressing her palms together. "Daddy made this," she whispered, eyes wide. Then she hugged me so tightly that flour streaked across her cheek. Her laughter that morning, high, bright, unrestrained, was my victory. I thought then, foolishly, that nothing could unravel that bond. The memory flickered out. Now, in the present, I stood before a flawless store-bought cake, sugar roses immaculate, guests filling the house with perfume and chatter. I held both birthdays at once, the one with flour on her face, and the one waiting to unfold. By evening, voices filled the rooms, coats tossed over chairs, shoes scuffed against polished floors. Wine uncorked, glasses clinked, frosting mingled with cologne. I moved among them quietly, smiling, refilling drinks, but my gaze returned again and again to the doorway. When Emily finally arrived, the air shifted. She wore burgundy, the same shade as the balloons, and laughter clung to her like perfume. Every head turned, she shone. My chest ached with pride that tasted almost like grief. I saw her at 6 again, tugging my hand toward the carousel at the fair, begging for one more ride. The candles flickered. Voices rose in song, off-key but joyous. I stood close enough to see her lashes quiver as she blew them out, flames vanishing into smoke. The room cheered, glasses lifted, phones flashing. I clapped the loudest, my smile stretching wide. For a fleeting instant, it almost felt real, that this was still family, still love. Then Emily leaned in, smile frozen for the cameras, her voice ablaze behind velvet. "If you want to give me the best gift, disappear from my life, forever." The champagne glass shook in my hand, bubbles spilling over. I steadied it before anyone noticed, forced a nod as though she'd said something sweet. I answered with silence. Because to speak would have been to ruin the night she claimed as hers. I thought the night had already dealt its cruelest blow. I didn't know. Worse was still to come. I stayed, passing cake slices, dabbing stains from the cloth, laughing where laughter was expected. To anyone watching, I was just another smiling guest. Only I knew the silence had already swallowed me whole. At the center of the table, Emily sparkled, her circle of friends pressing closer. She never looked my way again. To her, I had already granted her wish. The candles sputtered out, one after another, until the room dimmed and applause swelled around Emily. Her friends whistled, lifting their glasses, snapping photos with the flashes that left white spots dancing in my eyes. I clapped too, my palms tingling from the effort of keeping time with the others. But all I could hear was her voice, still echoing like it had been carved into the walls. "If you just walked out of my life, forever." I forced the words down, letting the fizz of champagne burn my throat. Yet they clung there, bitter and unyielding. My smile held, stiff, a mask that no one in that room could see past. To them, I was just background noise, an aging father hovering too close to the party lights. To her, I was something worse, a shadow she wanted erased. The music from the speaker crackled to life, low and jazzy, filling the spaces between conversations. Emily leaned into her friends, laughing, her laughter sharp like broken glass. She didn't glance my way, not even once, as if the seat I occupied had already been emptied. "Dad? The knife?" Her tone was sugar-sweet, loud enough for everyone to hear. I slid it toward her, careful not to let our hands touch. She grabbed it quickly, eyes flicking away, as though contact with me might leave a stain. Laughter burst again, this time over a clumsy toast from one of her co-workers. Someone spilled wine, crimson drops bleeding into the white tablecloth. I dabbed at it with a napkin, but no one thanked me. They were too busy raising their glasses. "To Emily, to her new chapter!" I raised mine too, but it felt empty, heavy only with the weight of pretense. The cake was cut, plates passed around, the scent of chocolate and buttercream filling the air again. I excused myself, slipping into the kitchen. The clatter of forks and chatter dulled behind the closed door. Here, the silence pressed closer. I leaned against the counter, my hand trembling as I gripped the edge. The smell of frosting was stronger here, thick and suffocating. My chest ached. I remembered when Emily was 6, standing on a stool beside me, covered in flour. "Don't stir too fast," I'd warned, but she had giggled, batter splattering across the counter. Back then, her laughter had been bright, effortless. Now, it was a performance. The door creaked. Heels tapped against the tile, and Emily slipped in, shutting it softly behind her. My breath caught. Maybe she had come to soften the blow, to say she didn't mean it, but her arms crossed, her face cool. "You didn't have to make such a big show," she said, her voice lowered, sharp as the edge of a blade. "It's embarrassing." I straightened. "I just wanted to celebrate you, Emily. That's what birthdays are for." Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Celebrate me? Or remind everyone you're still here?" The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to say I was here because I loved her, because I had always been here, even when she pushed me away. but the words froze, trapped in my throat. She didn't wait for an answer. She smoothed her dress, pasted on a bright grin, and slipped back out to her guests. The echo of her heels lingered longer than she did. I stayed, staring at the grooves in the wooden counter, the knife marks from years of meals shared in better times. My reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger. Tired eyes, shoulders slumped, mouth pressed into a line. I thought about leaving right then, slipping out into the night without another word. But tradition tethered me, the invisible chain of responsibility. So I returned, settling into my seat at the edge of the table. Another toast rose, another burst of laughter. I raised my glass when the others did. To Emily, they said, voices overlapping. To success, to love, to the future. The glasses clinked, crystal ringing like hollow bells. I drank, the bitterness stronger now. I clapped when someone made a joke, but the sound was flat, disconnected. No one looked my way. My presence was a ghost in the room, tolerated but unseen. And as Emily leaned against her friends, head thrown back in laughter that didn't reach her eyes, I realized something painful and clear. She didn't just want me gone tonight. She wanted me gone from every tomorrow. Still, I stayed. Because walking away too soon, too obviously, would have been admitting the truth. That she had already succeeded. That I was already gone. The celebration roared behind me, muffled only by the walls of that house. From the outside, it might have seemed like joy lived there. Glasses clinking, laughter spilling, music thumping through the floorboards. But every sound carried a sharp edge for me, like glass pressed against the skin. I sat in my chair longer than I should have, hands resting on my knees, watching the world move around me. Emily twirled with one of her friends, her burgundy dress flowing as though it belonged in another life, another family. Her smile was perfect, too perfect, and never once did it reach me. The room seemed brighter around her, dimmer where I sat. Even the candles on the table flickered more fiercely when she leaned close, dimmed when she walked away. My coat hung by the door, familiar and worn, its fabric smelling faintly of rain-soaked wool. I thought about leaving it there, thought about staying until the last toast, but the truth was already carved in stone. Her words had severed me, clean and cold. I rose quietly. The chair legs scraped against the wood floor, but no one turned. The music swallowed the sound whole. At the door, I hesitated. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked like a stranger, a man graying at the temples, eyes lined deeper than last year, shoulders bowed as if carrying stones no one else could see. One of the guests, half drunk, stumbled close. "Heading out already?" he asked, tilting his glass, champagne sloshing over his fingers. "Work in the morning," I said, voice steady, eyes fixed on the doorknob. He nodded, already pulled back into the laughter, the warmth I was never part of. I glanced once more at Emily. She was leaning over the cake, showing something on her phone to her friends. Their faces glowed under the light, their laughter loud. I waited for her eyes to lift, to catch me in the act of leaving. They never did. I stepped out. The air struck colder than I expected, raw against my face. It smelled faintly of wet pavement, sharp and metallic, as though the sky had recently wept and dried again. The porch steps creaked beneath me, a sound I had heard countless times over the years, a sound that suddenly felt like goodbye. The neighborhood was quiet. Street lamps buzzed overhead, moths batting themselves senseless against the glow. My breath rose in pale clouds, dissolving into the dark. I walked slowly, each step echoing louder than the last. I thought about turning back, storming inside, demanding an explanation. But what would that change? Anger wouldn't rebuild the bridge she had burned. Instead, memories came, uninvited. Emily's small hand gripping mine at the fair when she was 6, her voice shrill with excitement as she pointed at the carousel, her face pressed against the window years later, waiting for me to come home late from work. I had been her anchor once. Now I was nothing more than ballast she wanted cut loose. At the corner of the street, I stopped under the amber glow of a lamp. I tilted my head back, watching moths spiral, caught in their endless orbit around something they'd never reach. I smiled. Not from happiness. Something else. Something no one in that house would understand if they saw. It wasn't resignation exactly. It wasn't revenge either. It was the quiet recognition of inevitability. For years, I had carried secrets she never knew, choices made to protect her, even when she despised me for them. And tonight, when she told me to disappear, I realized she might get exactly what she asked for, but not in the way she imagined. That was the smile that touched my lips, the kind born from knowing something the rest of the world was blind to. I shoved my hands into my pockets, turning away from the glow of the house. My footsteps echoed down the empty road. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then silence stretched again. Behind me, Emily's laughter spilled through the windows, bright and careless. She had no idea how fragile the ground beneath her feet had become. And me? I vanished into the night, just as she wished. At least that's what she believed. Because sometimes disappearing is not surrender. Sometimes it's the prelude to truth finally stepping out of the shadows. The night air was sharp against my face as I walked further down the street, but it wasn't the cold that made me shiver. It was the weight of everything I had carried for too long, truths I had hidden, lies I had chosen to live alongside. That small smile on my lips wasn't surrender. It was relief, a bitter kind. Because the moment Emily wished me gone, she unknowingly released me from the chains I had locked myself in. I had protected her for years, but protection had turned into something darker. The first cracks showed when she was still a teenager. She came home late one afternoon, her uniform wrinkled, eyes red from tears she didn't want to admit. I asked her where she'd been. She smirked instead of answering, dropped her bag at the door, and disappeared into her room. The phone rang an hour later. Her school. They said she hadn't attended classes in days. When I asked her, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "They must have mixed me up with someone else." The lie rolled off her tongue effortlessly. I wanted to believe her. I told myself she was just a kid, testing limits. But deep down, a shadow of unease curled in my chest. By college, the lies had sharpened into blades. A professor once emailed me about plagiarism, proof undeniable. I sat across from her in the kitchen, the clock ticking too loudly. She leaned back, arms crossed, a smirk tugging at her lips. "Dad, everyone copies. It's not like it matters." I could have fought back then. I could have drawn the line. Instead, I kept quiet, afraid that pushing her too hard would drive her away. And so the line blurred, stretched, snapped. Her adult life was worse. I'll never forget the day I found her at the office, papers scattered across her desk, her voice sharp into the phone. "No, adjust the numbers. Nobody double-checks that deep. It'll be fine." I froze in the doorway, the smell of ink and burnt coffee filling the air. She spotted me. Her face flickered with panic before settling into annoyance. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I held up the lunch bag in my hand, the tomato soup still warm. "Thought you might be hungry." She hung up too quickly. "You can't just show up like this." "What was that about?" I asked softly. Her eyes narrowed. "Work stress. You wouldn't understand." But I did. Maybe more than she ever guessed. That wasn't the only time. There were nights she stumbled home smelling of whiskey, perfume layered too thick. Once she flashed a bracelet in front of me. Shiny, expensive. "A gift from a client," she claimed. But I saw the store receipt peeking from her bag. She lied not because she had to, but because it was easier. Because deception had become her second skin. The darkest memory came last winter. I thought she was asleep, but I heard her pacing downstairs, her voice hushed on the phone. No, we'll shred the originals. Nobody audits past 5 years. If anyone asks, we'll say it was a system error. I've done worse. I stood frozen on the staircase, hand gripping the railing until my knuckles went white. The words sliced through me, each one proof of the life she had built from fraud. And still, I did nothing. The next morning, she smiled at me, her eyes tired but calculating. You stayed up late again. You need to take care of yourself, Dad. I nodded, pretending I hadn't overheard her crime whispered into the night. But silence is betrayal, too. I started collecting things. Crumpled notes she tossed into the trash. USB drives left plugged in too long, printed reports carelessly abandoned on the counter. I pieced them together like a puzzle, each shard cutting deeper into my hands. The guilt was suffocating. When I shaved, I couldn't meet my reflection. At church, every hymn about truth rang hollow, each word an accusation. Because by shielding her, I wasn't loving her. I was enabling her. I was her accomplice in absence. Then the investigators came. Men in suits, their voices calm but their eyes sharp. We're looking into some irregularities, one said. Do you know anything about your daughter's work? I lied. She's just stressed. Young professionals, they make mistakes. They left, but I saw it in their faces. They didn't believe me. Months passed. Emily sank deeper, and I kept pretending. Every time she laughed off a warning, every time she brushed me aside with, "You worry too much," I sank further into complicity. Until tonight. When she looked me in the eyes at her birthday table and said the best gift I could give her was to vanish, something inside me shattered. For years, I had sacrificed peace, integrity, my very sense of self, just to shield her. And in return, she wished me gone. So I smiled, not out of joy, not out of victory, but because she had freed me from the burden of hiding her crimes, freed me from the lie that love means silence. The evidence no longer burned a hole in my drawer. My silence was no longer required, because soon she would face the truth on her own. Behind me, the house pulsed with laughter, glasses clinking, her voice sharp and bright above the rest. But in my mind, I already saw it. The sirens, the knock on the door, the disbelief on her face when the mask fell. And me? I would no longer be her shield. Sometimes love means protecting, and sometimes love means letting the world break your child, so they can finally see what you never could make them understand. The night after I left the party, silence pressed against me like a heavy blanket. I walked for blocks, replaying the scene in my mind, the candles, her words, the smile I forced as I slipped out. But when I returned home, the past was waiting for me, wearing the face of my sister. Linda sat at my kitchen table, her coat draped over the chair, steam rising from a mug of tea she'd helped herself to. The faint smell of lavender clung to her clothes, though underneath it lingered the sharp, expensive perfume she always wore, the kind that announced her presence before she spoke. "You didn't stay long," she said without looking up. Her voice was smooth, practiced, but every syllable carried the weight of accusation. I hung my coat by the door, my shoulders tight. "How did you even get in?" She lifted the spare key from the counter, twirling it between her fingers like a coin she'd won. "You should know by now. I always find my way back into this house." Her eyes finally met mine, cold and sharp. "So, did she do it? Did Emily finally tell you to your face what the rest of us already knew?" Linda had always despised me. Since we were children, she claimed I was the favored one, the golden child who could never fail. When our parents died, the inheritance wars only deepened the wound. She walked away with bitterness, I with guilt. And yet, here she was, sipping tea in my kitchen as though she owned it. "She's my daughter," I said flatly. Linda's laugh was brittle, echoing against the walls. "Your daughter is a viper, I've seen the way she talks to you. The way she looks at you like you're some piece of trash stuck to her shoe. She's lost, I whispered. But she's not. Don't finish that sentence. Linda's eyes narrowed. You've spent her whole life pretending she's something she's not. Shielding her. Covering up. It's pathetic. I turned away, leaning on the counter, my palms pressing into the cool surface. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence between us. She's still my child, I said finally. Linda rose, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. She moved closer, her perfume suffocating in the small space. And what has that loyalty bought you? Tonight she told you to disappear, didn't she? I didn't answer, but she didn't need me to. She paced the kitchen, fingertips trailing across the cupboards as if she were inspecting for dust. Her movements were deliberate, mocking. You know what I remember? Mom saving the last piece of pie for you, even though I asked first. Dad buying you that bicycle while I got the hand-me-down. You always got the spotlight. And now look at your precious daughter. She's exactly the same. Selfish. Cruel. A mirror of you. Her words hit harder than she knew, because the truth was, Emily did mirror me in ways I couldn't deny. Stubborn, proud, hungry to win. But where I had fought for family, she had fought for herself alone. You can't blame her for my mistakes, I said quietly. Can't I? Linda snapped. She's the proof of them. Every lie she tells, every fraud she commits, it's your blood running through her veins. And you just stand there, smiling like the fool you've always been. Her voice softened suddenly, almost gentle though it dripped with poison. She'll drag you down with her, you know. Everyone sees it. Everyone but you. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles pale. Memories flickered. Emily at 6, at 16, at 26. Every lie I'd swallowed. Every warning I'd ignored. You've been protecting her from the world, but who's going to protect you from her? The question hung in the air, heavier than any accusation. For a moment I saw it clearly. Emily not just as my daughter, but as the architect of her own downfall. The investigators, the evidence, the weight of my silence. Linda's presence, cruel as it was, forced me to confront what I had buried. She smirked, sliding the key back across the counter. You'll see soon enough. And when you do, don't come running to me. Because I warned you. She set down the mug, the clink of porcelain loud in the quiet kitchen. Then she left, her heels striking the pavement outside, each step echoing long after the door shut. The silence afterward was suffocating. I poured myself a glass of water, but it did nothing to wash down the bitterness her words had stirred. I walked into my study. The lamp cast a warm glow over the desk, but it only highlighted the shadows creeping into every corner of the room. I opened the drawer, the one I had locked and unlocked 100 times. Inside, the stack of files waited, pages heavy with truth. USB drives gleaming faintly, holding the fragments of every lie I had gathered. I touched them, my fingers lingering. For years, I had kept them as insurance. Tonight, they felt like a sentence ready to be carried out. Linda thought she had come here to wound me, to tear open old scars. But she had done something else. She had reminded me of what I had to do. I closed the drawer, locking it firmly. My reflection in the dark window met my eyes, tired but resolute. She thought I was weak. Emily thought I was disposable. But both of them were wrong. Because the storm was already gathering, and I, finally, was no longer holding it back. The night at Emily's house stretched on, candles burning low, laughter spilling louder as the champagne bottles emptied. She had positioned herself at the center of it all, surrounded by her friends, her colleagues, even a few strangers whose names she barely remembered. It didn't matter. What mattered was that they saw her, admired her, envied her. Music thumped, glasses clinked, the sweet scent of frosting mingled with perfume and alcohol, Her smile was wide, perfect, but beneath it there was an edge, sharp and hungry, the same edge I had seen so many times before. And then, the knock came. It was firm. Too firm for a neighbor, too deliberate for a friend arriving late. The sound cut through the chatter like a blade, silencing the room for a heartbeat. "Who's that?" one of her friends muttered, half laughing. Emily straightened, her eyes flicking to the door. "Probably another guest," she said, voice light but tight at the edges. The knock came again, louder this time. When the door opened, the room froze. Uniforms filled the doorway, dark against the glow of the party lights. Police officers, their badges gleaming, their voices calm but commanding. The smell of cold night air rushed in with them, sharp against the heavy sweetness inside. "Emily Carter?" one officer asked, his tone clipped, her laughter caught in her throat. "Yes? That's me. Why?" "You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. You need to come with us." The words detonated in the room. Gasps erupted, glasses slipped from hands, shattering on the floor. Music still played faintly, absurd in the chaos, until someone fumbled to turn it off. Emily's face drained of color. She took a step back, colliding with the edge of the table. The candles trembled, wax spilling onto the tablecloth. "There must be some mistake," she said quickly, her voice rising. "You can't just walk in here. This is my birthday." "Ma'am, you need to cooperate," the officer replied, already pulling handcuffs from his belt. Her friends murmured, confusion mixing with fear. One of them whispered, "Is this real?" Another pulled out a phone, recording. The glow of the screen lit Emily's panicked face. She snapped, "This isn't me! This is someone else's fault! My father! He's been trying to ruin me for years!" The accusation hung heavy. People looked at each other, at her, at the officers. None of them looked at me, because I wasn't there. I was already gone, just as she wanted. But she still tried to drag me back, even in my absence. "Dad!" she shouted into the empty room, her voice breaking. "I know you did this. You couldn't stand to see me succeed." The officers didn't flinch. One stepped forward, his hand steady on her arm. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent." She pulled back violently, her bracelets clattering against the table. "No, you don't understand. He's the one who's been keeping records, watching me, trying to destroy me." Her guests stared in silence now. The air was thick, the smell of burnt wax and spilled wine mixing with fear. Finally, her closest friend whispered, "Emily, is it true?" Her face twisted. For the first time, the polished mask she always wore slipped, revealing the raw panic beneath. "No," she snapped. "Of course not. Don't listen to them." "Don't listen to him!" But the him she meant was nowhere to be seen. The handcuffs clicked around her wrists, the sound louder than the music had been all night. She flinched, jerking once more, but the officers held firm. "Please," she whispered then, her voice breaking. "Please, this isn't fair." The irony stung even in her own ears, because fairness had never been her currency, deception was. As she was led toward the door, the room parted around her. Her guests stood frozen, some whispering, some staring at the floor, ashamed of how quickly their admiration had turned to silence. On the table, the cake sat half-eaten. Candles drowned in their own wax. Balloons sagged in the corner. The party was over. Outside, the night swallowed the procession of uniforms and flashing lights. Red and blue strobed against the windows, painting the stunned faces inside in colors of warning. Emily twisted once more, shouting into the darkness, "Dad, you did this to me!" But the night gave no answer. Only the sirens, fading into the distance, carried her voice away. Back in my house, I sat in the study, the drawer locked once more. The files had been enough. They didn't need me there. The truth carried its own weight. I closed my eyes, hearing her voice even now, Accusing, desperate, broken. A father should feel guilt. A father should feel sorrow. I felt both. And yet, beneath it all, I felt something else too. Justice. And in that moment, I knew the gift she had demanded, the gift of my disappearance, had been granted. But not in the way she had imagined. But the scene at her house didn't end cleanly. The aftermath was messier, crueler. As the officers moved her toward the door, one of them announced, "Search the premises." A pair of uniforms fanned out, opening drawers, bagging documents. The rustle of plastic evidence bags filled the silence. Guests watched with wide eyes, clutching their coats as though the searchlights might swing toward them next. Emily thrashed harder. "You can't touch my things! This is illegal!" The officer remained calm. "We have a warrant, ma'am." He held up a folded paper, its seal glinting under the chandelier. Her friends exchanged glances, panic sparking. One of her colleagues muttered, "I told her not to mess with those numbers." Too quietly, but loud enough that others heard. The betrayal sliced through the room like ice. Emily spun toward him, her voice hoarse. "You liar! You were part of it too!" He shrank back, eyes down, already distancing himself from her. Another friend slipped out the back door, heels clicking against the tiles, desperate to escape the taint of association. The house that had pulsed with celebration minutes ago now stank of fear, spilled wine souring on the floor, frosting curdling in the warm air, the faint smell of smoke from candles extinguished too late. The officers read her rights again, voices steady, almost bored with routine. But to the guests, each word landed like a hammer. Fraud, embezzlement, obstruction. Words that would ripple out tomorrow into headlines, whispers, ruined reputations. Emily's body sagged, her voice broke, shifting from anger to desperation. "Please, just give me time. I can explain everything. I'll pay it back. I'll fix it." The officers said nothing. She turned on her friends next. "Help me. Tell them I didn't do anything. You know me." But their silence was louder than their voices ever could have been. Phones were still raised, some recording, some texting frantically. None lifted a hand to help her. When they pulled her out onto the porch, the cold hit her like a slap. She gasped, shivering, her arms bound in steel. The flashing lights painted her face in violent strokes of red and blue. Neighbors stood on porches, whispering her name, some shaking their heads. Children peeked from behind curtains. Emily's eyes darted everywhere, wide and frantic. "Dad!" she screamed again, her voice ragged. "Please, I know you're out there." But only the radio static of the patrol cars answered. The officers guided her into the back seat. The door slammed, the lock clicking shut. Her forehead pressed against the window, fogging the glass with each desperate breath. For the first time in years, she looked like a child again. Not the polished woman in a burgundy dress, but a little girl cornered, lost, terrified. The sirens rose, pulling away. The sound carried her voice into the distance until only silence remained. Back inside, her guests shuffled uncomfortably, stepping over shattered glass and half-eaten cake. Some gathered their things quickly, eager to vanish before reporters arrived. Others lingered, whispering about what they had just witnessed. On the table, the candles had burned out, leaving twisted stubs drowned in wax. A lone balloon popped in the corner, the sharp sound making everyone flinch. The party was not just over. It had become a memory no one wanted to keep. And across town, I sat in my study. The drawer remained locked, the files untouched now. I didn't need to open it anymore. Her downfall had begun without me lifting another finger. For years, she had asked for freedom from me, for space, for my disappearance. Tonight, she got it. But her wish had come with a price she never imagined. And I, for the first time in years, breathed without the weight of lies pressing down. The house was quiet in the way hospitals get quiet after visiting hours. Sterile, humming, emptied of anything warm. The sirens were long gone. The only sound left was the refrigerator's low buzz, the tick of the kitchen clock, and the faint rustle of papers inside the drawer I hadn't opened again. My phone lit up on the counter, vibrating against the marble. An unknown number. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. "Mr. Carter? Detective Alvarez, we executed the warrant this evening." Her voice was even, unhurried, the kind of calm that doesn't flinch when rooms erupt. "I understand," I said. "We'll need a formal statement. We can come to you now, or you can come to the precinct at 7. Your call." I glanced at the window. The glass reflected a tired man with flour still caught in the crease of his sleeve. "Come by," I said. "Now is fine." "10 minutes?" she replied, and the line clicked dead. I poured 2 mugs of coffee out of habit and realized immediately how foolish that was. I rinsed one, left the other steaming on the table. The kitchen smelled faintly of detergent and something sweet that had turned, like a cake forgotten in the oven. Sugar burned at the edges. A knock. Not the kind from the party. Measured. Professional. I opened the door to a woman in a dark coat, hair pulled back, plain notebook in hand. A second officer hovered behind her, eyes scanning the hallway, then drifting to the shoes lined by my mat. "Detective Alvarez," she said, offering a small nod. "Sergeant Keene." They stepped in with the caution of people who have been inside more homes than their own. "Please," I gestured to the table. "Sit." Alvarez didn't waste time. "We'll record with your permission." She placed a small device on the table, red light blinking. I nodded. She clicked the button. "State your full name." "Richard Carter." "Time is 12:43 a.m. Mr. Carter, earlier tonight, Emily Carter was taken into custody. You've previously spoken with our office. Before we begin, do you have any materials you wish to provide related to the case?" My fingers found the drawer handle before my mind did. The lock gave with a small resistance. The smell of paper and dust rose as I slid the files out and set them on the table. Folders slick with use. USB drives wrapped in labeled tape. Years of being a father pressed flat into manila. Sergeant Keene pulled on gloves with a soft snap. Evidence bags crackled. The room filled with the sound of paper shuffling, plastic sealing, pens scratching. "Where did you obtain these?" Alvarez asked, eyes on me. "Home, office, printers, the trash sometimes." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I didn't go looking for them at first. They were left for me to find. Why collect them?" I looked at the coffee cooling in front of me. Steam thinned and vanished. "Because I thought love could wait for a better time, to be honest. And because I was afraid if I confronted her, I'd lose whatever was left." Her pen paused. "Why now?" A long breath. "Because tonight, she asked me to disappear, and I realized I already had. I was there in body, not in truth. This is the truth." No one spoke for a moment. The refrigerator hummed on. The clock ticked. Alvarez flipped a folder open, scanning. "These help establish intent. They fill the timeline." She didn't look up when she said it, but the words landed like small, solemn gifts. Not relief, not praise, just a fact. She closed the folder. "We'll need you at the precinct in the morning. Recorded statement, signatures. We've also recovered devices from the residence." I swallowed. "Will I need to see her?" "That's up to you," she said, and her face softened in a way that didn't patronize. "But she'll likely ask." They stood. More plastic, more pens. Quiet, careful movements of people who handle what can't be undone. At the door, Alvarez paused. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes." "You're allowed to feel 2 things at once." I nodded, though I didn't know which 2 she meant. Grief and relief, love and fury, guilt and something that sounded like mercy. After they left, the house felt emptier, as if taking the files had removed one of its organs. I washed the empty mug. It clinked once against the sink, a small bell closing the night. Dawn arrived not with color, but with a slow gray that leaked into the rooms. I drove to the precinct, in a silence that made the engine sound louder. The building was newer than I expected. Glass, steel, a lobby that smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. A vending machine blinked in the corner like a tired sentinel. A clerk slid a visitor badge toward me. Down the hall. Interview room C. The hallway lights buzzed. I passed a bench where a young man slept with his hood over his face, a woman murmuring into a phone beside him, voice thin with exhaustion. A metal door clicked behind me. Somewhere, a printer chattered, spitting out pages like a heartbeat. Detective Alvarez met me outside the room. Same coat, same expression. Thank you for coming. Inside, the room was as bare as I imagined. Table, 2 chairs, a camera winking a red dot. She slid a release toward me, then a pen. My hand shook once before it settled. We'll keep this straightforward, she said. You'll read each page, sign where indicated. Then we'll record. I read. The pages smelled like paper fixative and something acidic, ink that hadn't fully dried. The words were mine now, even printed. I signed. We recorded. I spoke. Not with drama, not with apologies. Just what happened. What I saw, what I kept, what I turned away from until I couldn't anymore. My words landed in the room with quiet weight. The camera took them without judgment. When we finished, Alvarez switched off the device. We've interviewed a coworker. He's cooperating. Audit trails from the company servers match timestamps in your files. We recovered a shred bin, and partial reconstruction software pulled fragments that also match. I don't need the details, I said, but she gave them anyway. Not for me, but for the record that would eventually hold us all. She stood. There is one more thing. She's asked for a phone call. She listed you. A small old ache stirred. The kind you think you've retired until it taps your ribs from the inside. I'll speak to her, I said. Not in a room together. Over a receiver that smelled of bleach and too many hands, separated by a pane of thick glass that turned faces into dull reflections. They brought her in with an officer at her elbow. She looked smaller in the fluorescent light, last night's makeup smudged into bruised shadows beneath her eyes. The burgundy dress was gone. A gray sweatshirt had swallowed her edges. She sat, lifted the receiver with a hand that didn't quite stop trembling. She didn't speak at first. Just watched me as if waiting for the script we'd always used. My apology, my compromise, my promise to fix what she broke. Dad, she said at last. The word was fragile and hard in the same breath. Emily. They're lying. She forced a laugh that died quickly. They're twisting everything. Across the glass, our breath fogged in thin, separate clouds. They have what they have, I said. You gave it to them. Not a question. I didn't answer, and that told her more than words would. Her eyes flashed. You've always wanted to control me. This is your final act. The old reflex rose, explain, soften, bargain, but it didn't make it to my mouth. You asked me to disappear, I said. My voice sounded calm, almost gentle. This is what disappearance looks like, Em. I stepped out of the way of the truth. She blinked, surprise cutting through the anger. You think this is noble? Throwing me to wolves and calling it honesty? I think you built a cliff, I said quietly, and I stopped standing under it, waiting to catch you every time you jumped. Her jaw clenched. She looked down, a crack forming in the mask. When she lifted her head again, her voice had shrunk. I can fix it, if you help me. Tell them you made a mistake. Tell them you misread the files. You can say you were confused. That would be another lie. My hand tightened around the receiver. Plastic creaked. And we've lived in those too long. For a moment, she was a child again. The way she used to look at me when thunder shook the windows. Something like fear flickered, then hardened into something I recognized and couldn't hold anymore. Defiance. You don't get to be the hero now, she whispered. You were never there when it mattered. The line hit me in the softest place. But even there, something had changed. "I was there," I said. "I was there so much I lost myself. And it still wasn't what you wanted." She leaned back, eyes bright with a kind of fury that keeps a person warm when everything else gets cold. "I will hate you for this." "I know." She slammed the receiver down first. A guard touched her shoulder. For the barest second, under the fluorescent glare, I saw the girl who used to sleep with a nightlight shaped like a moon, the girl who counted my footsteps in the hall outside her door. Then she was gone. The receiver felt suddenly heavy, as if the weight had shifted from her side to mine. I set it back in the cradle and stood. Detective Alvarez waited by the door. Not intrusive, not kind, just present. "She'll be arraigned tomorrow," Alvarez said as we stepped into the hallway. "Bail hearing to follow. Her counsel will advise her." "Of course." We walked past the vending machine. The coffee inside the glass looked like oil. I fed it a crumpled bill anyway, listened to the rattle and hiss of a machine too old to do anything well. The cup warmed my hands more than it comforted my mouth. Outside, the morning had finally decided to be morning. The sky wasn't blue so much as less gray. The air had that clean bite that follows a night of heavy weather. Across the street, a woman in a yellow coat tugged a child along by the mitten, their laughter bright and useless against the precinct's brick. Alvarez stopped at the steps. "We may call you again." "I'll answer," she nodded. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Carter." I started down the sidewalk, the cup still hot enough to sting my fingers. The city sounded the way cities do when they wake. Delivery trucks exhaling, a metal grate slamming somewhere, a dog insisting on something important. I walked without deciding where, listened to my own footsteps join the morning's inventory. When I reached the corner, I paused under a streetlight blinking out for the day. The bulb hummed once, went quiet. I thought about all the gifts I'd given Emily in her life. Bikes and books and stupid little trinkets she forgot by the end of summer. None of them had been as heavy as the one I gave her now. The truth isn't merciful, but it is honest. And sometimes, honesty is the only thing left you can give someone you love, when everything else you've tried has made them smaller. "This was the only gift I could give you," I said to no one, to the air, to the part of me that still counted her footsteps in dreams. Then I kept walking, not faster, not slower, just enough to meet whatever waited beyond the end of the block, the morning after. The city didn't look different, but it felt it. News traveled faster than traffic. By the time the sun had burned through the haze, headlines had already sprouted across screens. Names whispered in office corridors, neighbors' kitchens, subway cars, local exec arrested on fraud charges. Her photo, grainy from someone's phone, spread across feeds. The burgundy dress, the handcuffs biting her wrists, the stunned defiance on her face. People zoomed in, dissected her expression as if truth could be read in pixels. I sat at the kitchen table, the newspaper spread before me, though I'd already read the story online. Ink smudged my fingers, a familiar dirtiness I couldn't wash off no matter how much I scrubbed. The coffee tasted more bitter than usual, though I'd measured it the same. A knock at the door startled me. It wasn't police this time, just the mailman, leaving envelopes with windows showing bills I already dreaded. But behind him, across the street, I caught a neighbor's glance. She held it a fraction too long, then looked away, tugging her son toward the car. Shame is contagious. Later that day, I walked to the courthouse. The building loomed, sandstone washed pale by decades of weather. Inside, the air was cool, humming with whispers and footsteps on marble. Reporters crowded the steps, microphones like bayonets. I didn't stop. I wasn't there to be part of their story. I was there because silence was no longer mine to hold. They called my name to the stand. The wood beneath my palm was smooth from years of oaths sworn and broken. I raised my hand, felt the weight of every eye on me. "Do you swear to tell the truth? The whole truth? And nothing but the truth?" The words felt like shackles and freedom in the same breath. "I do." The prosecutor's questions came steady, clinical. "Did you collect these documents?" "Yes." "Were you aware of their content?" "Yes." "Did you provide them willingly?" "Yes." Each answer stripped a layer from me, until I wasn't a father or a protector or a fool. I was just a man telling the truth. When they dismissed me, I stepped down to a room colder than when I'd entered. Emily wouldn't look at me. Her eyes fixed on the table, her jaw tight, her shoulders trembling under the prison gray. That night, the house was darker than usual. I walked through the rooms, touching objects like old friends. Frames still holding her childhood drawings. The dent on the hallway wall where she'd crashed her bike indoors one summer. The nightlight shaped like a moon tucked away in a drawer I couldn't throw out. Every object carried two weights: the memory of love and the reality of where love had led. I opened the back door. The air smelled of damp earth, the garden long overgrown. Once Emily had helped me plant tomatoes there, her hands small and eager in the soil. We never harvested much, but she'd laughed, dirt streaked on her cheeks, holding up a crooked fruit like treasure. I leaned against the doorframe, the night pressing close, and whispered, "I hope you remember that too, somewhere." Days passed. Calls came from lawyers, reporters, even relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Some wanted comment, some wanted gossip, some wanted blood. I gave none. Linda called too. Her voice held no sympathy, only triumph disguised as concern. "You see, I warned you," she said. "You should have cut her loose years ago." I let her speak, then I hung up. Her victory meant nothing in the ruins. Weeks later, I returned to the courthouse for sentencing. The air was heavier this time, the gallery thick with anticipation. The judge read the charges, the counts, the years. His voice was steady, practiced. The gavel fell, and with it, a sound that wasn't just wood on wood. It was the sound of finality, of a story ending whether we wanted it to or not. Emily stood, wrists cuffed again, face pale but composed. For the first time, she didn't look for me. She looked past me, through me, at something I couldn't see. As they led her away, her lips moved. No sound reached me, but I read them anyway. "I hate you." And beneath it, though maybe I only imagined it, a flicker of something else. "Don't leave me." I walked out into sunlight. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed, questions flew. I didn't answer. My silence was not theirs to use. At home, I sat once more at the kitchen table. The drawer where the files had been was empty now, only dust at the corners. The silence in the house was vast, but not suffocating. For the first time, it was honest. I thought about her words on her birthday, that disappearing was the only gift she wanted. In the end, I had given it, but not in the way she dreamed. I had disappeared not by leaving the room, but by stepping out of the lie we had both lived in. After the trial, outside the courthouse, the steps boiled with noise. Reporters shouted, lenses snapped, microphones thrust forward like spears. Their words blurred into each other. Betrayal, family scandal, fall from grace. A man I barely knew from the neighborhood caught my eye. His lips moved. Sorry for you, but his gaze lingered on me like I was part of the spectacle too. And maybe I was. Because truth doesn't separate the teller from the told. It stains everyone it touches. I kept walking, the voices chasing me down the steps. One reporter called out, "Do you feel vindicated?" Another, "Do you regret turning on your daughter?" The questions cut deep, but I didn't answer. Vindication was too clean a word. Regret was too shallow. What I carried was heavier, stranger. The ache of knowing justice and love had fought inside me, and justice had won. That evening, I opened her bedroom door for the first time in months. The room still smelled faintly of her perfume, Sweet, sharp, defiant. Clothes lay where she'd left them, shoes kicked half under the bed, a scarf looped over the chair as if she might come back any minute. I sat on the edge of her bed. The mattress dipped, familiar. For a moment I remembered tucking her in here, her small body cocooned under blankets, whispering, "Leave the light on." Now the only light came from the hallway, spilling a narrow stripe across the carpet. Dust motes floated through it, slow and aimless. I picked up a photo from her nightstand. She was 10, grinning through missing teeth, holding a birthday balloon. My hand shook, the glass frame cool against my skin. It felt like mourning, not for someone dead, but for someone who had chosen a path that took her beyond reach. A funeral without a body. Back in the kitchen, I lit the candle again. The flame caught quickly, small but steady. I let it burn while I washed the dishes, while I folded the newspaper, while I sat with my head in my hands. Each flicker painted the walls with shadows that seemed alive. And in the shifting light, I thought about what dignity meant. Not the absence of pain, but the courage to face it without disguise. Emily hadn't learned that lesson yet. Maybe prison would teach her, maybe it wouldn't. But for me, dignity meant no longer carrying lies, no longer pretending silence was love. The candle shrank slowly, wax pooling, flame stubborn. When it guttered at last, it left only smoke curling upward, the faint smell of something burned away. I didn't light another. Some endings need to stay endings. I rose, walked to the window, and looked out at the quiet street. The world was ordinary again. Cars parked, leaves rustling, a dog barking 2 blocks away. And maybe that was enough. Because though I had lost my daughter, I had kept something else. Something no one could take, not even her. My name, my truth, my dignity. Life doesn't always move in neat lines. Sometimes the ones we care for most are also the ones who hurt us the deepest. My story isn't just about betrayal. It's about the quiet, heavy choices many of us face as parents, children, or siblings. We protect, we forgive, we hope. And yet there comes a moment when silence no longer means love. Letting go becomes the only way to keep our dignity, and theirs. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear your reflections in the comments. And if you'd like to continue walking with me through more heartfelt stories like this one, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you for being here. May the days ahead bring you peace, courage, and gentle light.